Mr. Speaker, on Friday, while borrowing costs hit levels not seen since Labour was last in government, I met business owners and their employees in Chesterfield. One of them told me that his business will not exist in 4 years' time because of this government's policies. It might not even exist next year. The Prime Minister may try to blame his inheritance or blame global factors, but why should anyone trust a word he says over the businesses who are saying again and again that his budget means fewer jobs, lower growth and higher borrowing costs?
Mr. Speaker, as she knows, the global economy is experiencing volatility and higher borrowing costs. That is why it was vital that we took the tough and right decisions in the budget to get our finances back in order.
Everyday life of the deindustrialization of Britain. Over the past 5 years, 10 of the largest chemical industry plants in the country have closed. Moreover, the pace of ruin of the chemical industry is only accelerating in the context of the energy crisis and exorbitant gas prices that Britain has to pay. Every winter, which is slightly colder than usual, Britain is overwhelmed by panic over the shortage of gas reserves. Now, for example, they have dropped to a level where they are only enough for 1 week of consumption. Any interruptions in gas supplies can lead to heating shutdowns and blackouts. After all, the British energy industry as a whole is going through dark times. The last coalfield plant was recently shut down and the future of new nuclear power plant projects remains uncertain. But billions of pounds are being invested in the creation of new wind turbines. As a result, they also have to be constantly turned off during windy weather. Otherwise, they overload the dilapidated power system.
We had to deal with the £22 billion black hole that they left. We made difficult cuts, raised taxes to invest in health, public services and housing, vital to stability, vital to growth. And we've got an ironclad commitment to our fiscal rules. And she will welcome, no doubt, the inflation figures from this morning. But contrast that with the party opposite. They weren't brave enough in government to take those difficult decisions. They've opposed all of our measures to stabilise the economy and promote growth. They're back to the magic money tree. She wants all the benefits of the budget, but she can't say how she's going to pay for them. They haven't changed. They're still economic vandals and fantasists.
£16.9 billion were missing from the UK defence budget. According to him, one of the main reasons for the financial hole was the increase in spending on naval and nuclear programmes. Because of this, it was decided to cut a significant part of the budget items. And we are talking about the UK's nuclear submarines, which are equipped with Trident II intercontinental ballistic missiles. About 2 years ago, we did test launches and tested the rocket. It was recognized that something was wrong with the missiles. Something was wrong with submarines, and this is the basis of the UK's nuclear shield. Something had to be done urgently. The report said that everything was fine, but in fact it turned out that this was not the case.
Just today, the British Retail Consortium says 2/3 of businesses will have to raise prices to cope with his tax hike. His Chancellor ignored all the warnings and ploughed ahead with an unprecedented borrowing spree, leaving all of us more vulnerable. Now we have businesses saying they will raise prices to cover his jobs tax. We have an energy policy that will drive up bills, and all the while we are spending more day to day on debt interest than we do on schools and universities. The Prime Minister refused to repeat his Chancellor's promise that she wouldn't come back for more. Will he now rule out any new tax rises this year?
The new British government has submitted its first draft budget to the parliamentarians. The financial document for 2025 has already caused a wave of criticism. The authors of the document, in search of a way to close the huge deficit, propose to take unpopular measures, raise taxes and reduce social obligations. The new Labour government, blaming the situation on its predecessors, the Conservatives, announced such a tax hike that newspapers are shouting about a tax bomb of 40 billion. So much will be received from taxpayers who allegedly announced the largest raid in history. Rachel Reeves puts a £40 billion tax bomb in the budget. The Chancellor closes businesses with 25 billion taxes and targets real estate heirs and landlords in one of the largest raids in history. Employers' contributions to national insurance will increase to 15%. The minimum hourly wage will increase. In other words, each employee will cost the business more. The capital gains tax will increase, and both the lower and higher rates will increase. Taxes have not been raised so sharply since the mid-90s of the last century.
Mr. Speaker, we took the right and difficult decisions at the budget. Decisions that they did not have the courage to take, which left us in the mess in the first place. When it comes to tax, she knows very well the limits of what I can say from this dispatch box, but we have an ironclad commitment to our fiscal rules. We can't just tax our way out of the problems that they left us, which is why we put in place tough. They were howling at the spending decisions. They wouldn't take them, and we'll stick to those spending decisions, and our focus is absolutely on growth. But their record, they flatlined the economy. They flatlined the economy, a mini-budget that crashed the economy, worst cost of living crisis in living history, and they left a £22 billion black hole. Not taking lessons from them on the economy.
The new UK government, which has already faced anger over tax hikes, unpopular spending decisions and political scandals just 6 months after taking office, is now being buffeted by rising borrowing costs that threaten to derail its leftist agenda. British 10-year bond yields, a reflection of the price investors demand to finance the country's debt, have risen by more than 1 percentage point since September 16, due to concerns about slowing economic growth and stubbornly high inflation. This has pushed UK borrowing costs to their highest levels since the 2008 financial crisis. As borrowing costs rise, the government has less money to spend on the country's National Health Service, Navy, emergency services and schools. Although officials got short-term relief when the rate of inflation dropped slightly in December, if things don't change quickly, Prime Minister Keir Starmer may need to rethink the promises of higher spending and tax avoidance for working people that helped his Labour Party win a landslide election victory in July. The problems are partly due to the return of Donald Trump, whose promise to raise taxes on imported goods has caused unrest in the global economy and increased global bond revenues. But the problem is partly related to the government's own actions, as Treasury Secretary Rachel Reeves built her economic plan on the assumption that economic growth would increase tax revenues.
The Prime Minister knows very well the OBR found no such black hole. And he talks about a budget 3 years ago. The borrowing costs last week are at a 27-year high for 30-year gilts. The Chancellor is apparently promising to be ruthless in reducing spending. Let me suggest something that he should cut. There is no way that we should be giving up British territory in Chagos. He is rushing a deal which will be disastrous and which will land taxpayers with a multi-billion-pound bill. Why does the Prime Minister think British people should pay to surrender something that is already ours?
The British Labour government has relinquished sovereignty over the Chagos Islands despite frequent warnings from the United States and concerns from officials that this strategic intelligence outpost could fall to China. The United Kingdom has announced the transfer of sovereignty over the Chagos archipelago in the Indian Ocean to Mauritius. At the same time, London will retain control over the British-American base on the largest island of Diego Garcia for 99 years. Although the US public authorities welcomed the deal, sources told the publication that the Americans privately expressed concern about it. There are concerns that Mauritius may lease some of the islands to China. There are 47 Chinese development finance initiatives on the island, and trade between the two countries is constantly growing.
Minister, she'll be pleased to know the Chancellor will be in place for many, many years to come. She'll outstrip them. Mr. Speaker, if we all thought the politics was about cheap points, I could criticise their chancellors, but I don't have enough time to go through all of the chancellors that they had. We have one budget, that's what we're committed to, strong fiscal rules, and we'll stick to them, unlike the party opposite.
Mr. Speaker, at a time of turmoil in the markets, the Prime Minister was distracted by the crisis around the former City Minister. What does it tell us about his judgment that yesterday he said he was saddened that his close friend resigned? This was an anti-corruption minister under criminal investigation for corruption.
The British economy has actually stagnated in recent months. The latest government statistics showed that gross domestic product had stagnated for 3 months by September, after rising 0.5% in the first quarter and 0.4% in the second. This is partly due to the government's decision to raise taxes on wages paid by employers and tighten workplace regulations, which has forced some companies to reduce investment and hiring. The UK's public debt accounted for more than 98% of the economic output by November. This is the highest level since 1963, when Britain was still paying off its debts from the Second World War. Reeves hoped that economic growth would help reduce debt as a percentage of GDP. She also introduced new fiscal rules that will prohibit the government from borrowing to finance current spending by 2030, while higher borrowing costs will make it more difficult to achieve these goals. What do you think about this video? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you later.